price of admission. For this one, I sit down with the CEO of the Concussion Legacy Foundation, Chris Nowinski, and fellow linebacker at Navy, Jake Juriga, to tackle one of the most pressing issues in sports today, traumatic brain injuries. We dive deep into how concussions affect athletes long-term and the critical work being done to raise awareness around that, the steps being taken to protect future generations. Our guest shares personal stories from the field and the ring and how it shapes their purpose. We also discuss the powerful new documentary about Tyler Sash, which sheds light on the devastating impact of concussions in the NFL. Stay tuned for a conversation about real costs to playing the game and the importance of protecting those who sacrifice for their love of that game. We're on. So today, very special episode. We're going to hit a topic that's, kind of been in my ballpark of researching every now and then. Today we got Jake Juriga. I pronounced that right?
That's all good. Yeah, Juriga.
Juriga.
Yeah.
Juriga. That's much better. So I appreciate that. Another Navy linebacker. So you would have been class of 14.
13. Close.
13.
Because you were a firstie when I was showing up plebe year.
Nice. Okay, I always get that messed up because I'm 10. I was thinking 4 years away, but I got math problems.
Overlap in the fall season is the tricky.
Yeah, for sure. So linebacker from St. Charles, Illinois, right?
That's right.
Your father played in the NFL.
Yep.
Yep, and we'll hit a little bit of that inside your story. But the other guest we're going to have on today is Chris Nowinski.
That's right.
He's a Harvard football player, did some pro wrestling, and co-founder of the Concussion Legacy Foundation. Now a neuroscientist. He's got a book, I think, called Head Games, turned into a documentary. In between, college, and then he did some time in pharmaceuticals and in biotech. After I'm thinking getting his master's at Boston University.
I think he did, but then he also did his PhD, I believe, there. Yeah.
Nice. Excellent. So, I think what triggered me to, my interest actually in the topic of CTE started when, obviously a couple guys I had on the podcast episodes were kind of like just joking about it. But then, I do the LinkedIn thing. I saw you talking about the Concussion Legacy Foundation and noticed you were kind of into that. Reached out. Tell us how you got into that.
Yeah, it was by pure chance. Well, I don't know if it's a God thing or what it was, and it's not something that I was necessarily like seeking, right?
Yeah.
And I guess if I really start the story where it should be, it was the first time I ever heard of CTE was in the case of Matt Brewer and the loss of Matt, and maybe we go into that more at some point, but with his case, they suspect that he might have had CTE, and so that was the first time I heard of it. And I didn't hear of it again until I actually met Dr. Nowinski. And so Chris was, this is the pure chance moment, is that I'm walking out of my, one of my 1L, like first year of law school classes. And as I'm walking out, a friend kind of like grabs me and says, "Hey, I think you might be interested in the speaker. He's speaking like the classroom right next door. If nothing else, grab a free lunch." But he played football at Harvard and he went on to do pro wrestling for a few years. And it's like an interesting enough story, free lunch. Had no idea what he was talking about, who he was. And then I sit in and listen to him speak for 45 minutes. And like a lot of what he's saying about repetitive head impacts and concussions and then CTE really resonated with me, and I appreciated his whole approach to it. But then he also not only hits on the athletic side, he starts talking about veterans. And at some point during his talk, it's just like Matt's memory surfaces, and it's like, I've got to talk to Chris afterwards about Matt and see if it's just that's my one personal connection or most personal connection to it. And So I get a chance to speak with him right afterwards, and not only did he know of Matt's story, but he was working with his brother Brant, and so there's this instant connection there, and ever since then I kind of kept touch with him, and fortunately I was able to do an internship with the Concussion Legacy Foundation this past spring. And so I spent the last a couple of months this past spring working with them.
Cool. For those that don't know, Matt was the same class as you, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Right, so same class, inside linebacker. Yeah.
You get to know someone well going through all that together.
Yeah, for sure. Went into the Marine Corps.
That's right.
After graduation, did that, came back, and I got Matt's CLF video from YouTube. I actually only found that probably 3 to 4 weeks ago for the first time. But it's been out there for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I think that'd be a good one for a lot of folks to watch.
Yeah.
Because there are some good triggers or warning signs for people to think about. And when I watched the documentary that we'll talk about when Chris gets on, there were some other warning signs on that one too.
Yeah.
Right.
No, so right. There definitely were.
So CTE, we'll ask Chris when he gets on, but like, as you understand it, as an intern in that organization, what would you say it is? Because, I've done my own research, but I'm just a peon, someone that actually has been in the organization. Tell us, what that is and educate us.
Sure. So, I'll say what I know. Definitely, Dr. Nowinski is going to be the one to really enlighten us on this.
Sure.
But my understanding is that CTE, in case people aren't aware from the very basic level, because again, this is something that like my dad played 6 years in the NFL, my brother played in the NFL, I played all the way through college, and I hadn't heard about it till Matt's case. And so my understanding, CTE stands for chronic traumatic encephalopathy. It used to be called punch drunk way back in 1920s.
Muhammad Ali, baby.
When they first started kind of coming up with a term for it and recognizing that boxers, after a certain period of time, started having what they called punch drunk. And later in the 1950s, 60s, they started calling it and referring to it as CTE. But where we're at now is in the last like 10 or 15 years, it seems like where the research has really picked up and we started to actually learn a lot more about it and are continuing to learn more about it. But that base level is just that it's caused, at least in part, by repetitive head trauma. And so it's not necessarily associated with the number of concussions you have. That's something that I think a lot of people jump to. And as I'm starting to, as I was working with the organization, I'm not technically with them anymore. But as I was working with them, there's sometimes those misunderstandings. And so really what the research is showing is that there is a dose response relationship. And it means that the more cumulative hits to the head you have and the more total force that those head hits represent, the higher your risk is of developing CTE. And so that's why you can associate that head impact with CTE. And it's like anything, it's a risk. It's not like you're definitely get CTE if you've hit your head a certain number of times. There's nothing to show that, but it's your risks go up substantially the more you hit heads. I think the technical terms that Chris might go into more is it's a neurodegenerative disease. And so it's something that gets worse with aging. It's usually not seen until like years down the road. It's not something like, there's the concussions, which is acute. It's a sudden, you hit your head, you feel the symptoms, people see the symptoms, at least maybe not right away. It's at least within hours or something like that, or typically where CTE is chronic, it's over time. And
out of all the things, because I go to the website and I look at some of the stories that people are talking about, and usually it's obviously family stories because the only way to diagnose it's after death.
Right.
And it seems like in the 50s and 60s is where it really kind of pops.
I think so. Yeah, I'm not as read up on the history, but that's my understanding is that was when they really started to actually refer to it as CTE.
Other than Aaron Hernandez, I guess he was a rare breed.
for.
He's just so young.
Oh, young. Yeah, I mean, but there's instances of that. We have another teammate who shared his name publicly, so it's out there. Gary Myers was confirmed to have CTE.
Yeah, so he was the only Navy football guy that I guess has been tested.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, he was tested and it was confirmed that he's not the only one. So there is an article for those listening who get the Shipmate magazine. I get that. I read through it, and it's just happened. I can't say I always read through it, but it's just recently I was flipping through it this spring, and Andy Bushak, he's 77, I believe. Was confirmed, and you know, if you haven't read that story, definitely look it up. It's online on USNA's website, I believe, too.
Yeah, I can put that one in the. I got the link, so I'll put it in the comments of the podcast. I want to post it, but yeah, man, it's crazy. I've circulated this conversation with my class. You know, we're on a like mass text message blast, and you know, talk to each other, get belligerent, you know, about whatever the topic of the day is. But this topic comes up a lot. So I thought, you know, when I saw your note on LinkedIn, I thought, man, it'd be great to actually do this. And just glad we're doing it today. You said your brother was in the NFL too?
Yeah, he was. He was for a couple of years with the Eagles.
What kind of position did he play?
He was center. He played guard at first in college, and then moved to center, and then was center. And he got a couple of snaps. He was behind Kelsey.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
But Kelsey, like, it was always like, oh, this might be perfect, and lined up that Kelsey's retiring and Luke's gonna step right in. And Kelsey was hurt for he went out with his elbow. I think when it first happened in 2020, he went out and he was out for a total of. It was right before the half, and so Luke got 4 snaps, and then halftime hit, and then Kelsey's right back in there. And yeah, he's one of those guys who seemed like he just never missed a game. So
he's a lineman.
He was a lineman. Yep. So was my dad. They were all offensive line.
And we'll get into that because I think the linemen get the brunt of the brute force and ignorance, right?
That's right.
Looks like we got Chris joining us now, so I'm going to add him and we'll go from there. Yeah. Sound good?
I'm looking forward to having him on.
Excellent. There he is. We got you loud and clear. How are you?
Good, Tony. How are you?
I'm doing okay. So everybody for the group, we already gave you a small introduction. With what I know about you, it was all appropriate. But you know, just excited to get 30 minutes of your time today. And with that, I would just want to open up the floor to you to give an introduction, who you are, and then tell us about CTE.
Sure. So I'm Chris Nowinski. I got interested in my brain after hitting it too many times. So grew up in Chicago, was recruited to play football at Harvard, was an all Ivy D tackle, got into healthcare consulting, got bored, got into pro wrestling with the WWE, starting with Tough Enough, and then Monday Night Raw, got kicked in the head too much, got post-concussion syndrome, got a 20-year headache, and started to dig into what I'd done to myself. Realized after a little bit of research back in 2003 that the story that I thought I knew about concussions wasn't the right one, and that they were much more serious than we ever thought. And so I started writing a book about it, and that sort of came out in 2006. No one read it, but that's fine. It gave me the plan to try to change the world when it comes to concussions and figure out this CTE thing. And started the Concussion Legacy Foundation in 2007, started the BU CT Center in 2008 with Dr. Ann McKee, Bob Stern, and been at it ever since. Went back to school, got my PhD in behavioral neuroscience. We're trying to solve chronic traumatic encephalopathy. When we started, there were 48 cases in the world ever proven, almost all boxers, and they called it punch drunk. And no ongoing research, no academic programs. It was just this forgotten disease that was interesting because it was first named punch drunk in 1928. By the 1950s, you had comedians like Red Skelton on TV playing punch drunk boxers, and everyone was having a laugh of what happened, and everyone sort of got it, but no one ever extrapolated that idea in any big way to other sports. Even back in the old literature, they were saying we'll find this in football too. So I got hurt at the right time when Bennett Amalu from the Concussion movie had published his first case. Worked with him on I gave him his third case, Andre Waters, and then realized that brain donation was the only way to understand it. And so started reaching out to families when I lost somebody, starting with Andre Waters, Justin Strelzik, Chris Benoit. And now we're 1,600 brains later, have redefined the disease, got NIH on board, got many sports to recognize it, and figured out how to prevent it. And now we're trying to figure out how to cure it.
You said something about, there were 60 cases prior to that were CTE cases at the time, right?
Yeah.
But the first one was the Mike Webster actual, post.
Yeah, he was case 46.
Okay, so how were the first ones diagnosed then?
So it's a good question. So because how you diagnose it has changed over time. So back then, the CTE is defined by a type of protein called tau that becomes abnormal. It misfolds, and it misfolds in what we thought was a unique way, but it's now been found in two other very rare diseases, where it's basically a structural protein in your long axons that are 1/20th the width of human hair. They have 6 or 7 microtubules inside of them. They're even smaller. And the protein holds those open. When it breaks, it just keeps crackling, it keeps breaking, keeps moving.
Yeah, the tau's like the structure, right?
Yeah. And it's like a scaffolding. And you could not see it until the 1970s. So back then, what we're calling punch drunk was other different findings, including a certain pattern of atrophy in the brain, a membrane in the middle of your brain that becomes torn, called a cavum septum pellucidum. And it was also being described sort of as the clinical syndrome, where in boxers, especially back then when they didn't have like protections, not that they have great ones now, different ones back then, you'd become cognitively impaired, emotionally out of control. You get slurred speech, you get Parkinsonism, and all those things you still get. But now we understand it as a pathologic entity, and we're reestablishing what are the clinical syndrome of it. And we can get into that if you'd like to. But it has evolved over time, and it wasn't until 2015 that our team, led by Dr. McKee, led a group of neuropathologists to actually define this is what CT is and this is what it's not.
Gotcha. Good stuff, man. Get me all pumped up, because like I keep on researching stuff, and to have that guy that kind of leads all this stuff is extremely exciting. So for you, I think you had an event, right, in WWE that kind of made you start seeking to understand some of this.
It was more of a series of events, but the final Concussion was a tag team match against the Dudley Boys in the Hartford Civic Center, and I got kicked to the chin that I probably stuck my head a little too close to, and just a standard concussion, but this one didn't go away. What I thought would be a short headache turned out to be a long headache, and then the other problem was I lied about it, so they sort of knew something was wrong, and I blacked out in the ring and forgotten what was supposed to happen and all that stuff. But back then we didn't have a protocol for that. So when the athletic trainer asked me, "Are you all right?" I said, "I'm fine." And the next day when I knew something was wrong, I almost told him I felt bad, but then I saw other guys, in the training room working through much more severe injuries than a headache in my mind. So I didn't tell them, and I kept getting hit, and I kept getting hit, and I kept going through tables for weeks. I actually then was honest, took a week off, got nervous about losing my job, lied, and went back, but I was still not feeling good. And so it was a 5-week odyssey where I kept getting worse, till the point where my manager, Teddy Long, told them, don't let him wrestle. He's not making much sense on the traveling. Yeah. And I had my first episode of REM behavior disorder. So something that we have tied to CT, but it's also tied to traumatic brain injuries. I act out my dreams now sometimes.
I have zero dreams.
You're not dreaming?
No, I have every once in a while. It's very hard. When I have them, I try to remember when I wake up, but the reasons why
I went through years without remembering my dreams too.
Yeah, man.
They're back though. Yeah, it's important. We'll dig into that later, because your sleep is really critical to you feeling good, as you know.
Which I'm definitely like, that's like number one priority for me right now is good sleep for sure.
Yeah.
Any other warning flags other than that for you? Or, I mean,
at that time, it was just, I just couldn't think straight. My head hurt all the time. I couldn't exercise without getting sick. Like I would go to the gym, try to hustle it out because you had to be in real great shape to be a wrestler and cardiovascularly. And 20 minutes in, I just feel like I was going to vomit. I would just quit. And I didn't understand that was bad. And I kept like going back the next day and trying to last another 10 minutes. And yeah, so that was dumb too.
Well, that's a new one though. So that's good because, it might be good for someone else.
Yeah.
Good in general. Tony, I don't mean to cut in on your
go for it.
Your podcast, but that was something that even as we're having this brotherhood meeting and we formed a committee to try to address concussion, and we want to make sure it's beyond just CTE. And there's other people in the group who also had never heard of post-concussion syndrome. And I don't think I knew that before working with CLF. So that's something I think all of this is good information to put out there and that people might hear about it and might be the spur that they need to look into it a little bit more. For sure.
Yeah, and let me just add, whenever you bring up post-concussion syndrome, then you have to separate it from CTE. So I had PCS is what we now call persistent post-concussion symptoms, is sort of a long tail of your type of brain injury that you got. When you get into your brain, a million things can go wrong, and sometimes symptoms last a long time. There's no known correlation between that and CTE. So like for me, even though I have a 10-year headache, it doesn't mean I have CTE. I might have CTE for other reasons. So if you have had concussion problems or long concussions, don't think it means you have CTE. PCS is fully treatable and you will get better with time. CTE is a different story.
Yeah. It's funny. You were talking about how you took that big hit in the WE and then you didn't remember anything until later, right? When you kind of like came to, you had some time in between when the hit was and when you came to, right?
Well, it was for me. I didn't formally black out, but I sort of scrambled my brain to the sense that, like, what makes wrestling safe is that when you're out there, there's certain parts you've talked about, and how things are supposed to go, and how things are supposed to end, and so you're always in the right place at the right time. Otherwise, it's very dangerous. And for me, when I got hit, that's when I realized, like, I don't remember what we're supposed to be doing from here on out. Like, it was just fog. And but I just kept saying, I don't know what's happening. Just tell me. And we knew you could talk in the ring quietly, and that's sort of a little secret of business. So they just told me what to do.
Yeah, don't tell Jordan Stevens that. He's a big wrestling fan, and he knows. The reason why I asked was I had to go back. I looked at the only documented concussion that I had, was on an interception, ran to the sideline. Don't remember it. Helmet was taken away. But my body was on autopilot.
Yeah.
Right. So I wonder how often that happens.
Oh yeah. I mean, that lots of people finish the game with concussions, not realizing they're concussed. Like one of the stories I told in my book was Brett Favre was very public about like getting knocked silly, going to the sideline. The doctor turned his back and he ran back onto the field, threw a 50-yard touchdown, and they took him out for the rest of the game. He doesn't remember any of it.
Yeah. And so while we're on that subject, there was a new documentary that just came out, right?
Yeah.
Finished it over the weekend. I think, Jake did the same. Concussed: The American Dream. It's a story of Tyler Sash. I didn't know who Tyler Sash was prior to that. I don't follow the NFL that closely, actually.
Yeah.
I'm just focused on other stuff. But he was a small town multi-sport athlete. Goes to Iowa Hawkeyes as a DB, 3 years in the NFL. On that third year, really, I think he starts, he gets cut. And his whole story going through that it sounded very similar to, the tail end of the Matt Brewer YouTube video.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like those dots kind of connected. What was your take on the documentary? Same with you, Jake. We're here to kind of talk about that because it's kind of fresh. What do y'all think?
I mean, I thought it was well done. I mean, I remember interviewing for it like pre-pandemic, so it was like in the works for a long time. It was sort of a passion project that wasn't well funded, so it took a long time to finish. But I thought, Tyler's story is very compelling. They shared a lot of important perspectives. I thought their approach to talking about youth football and how we have an obligation to make that safer for the youngest kids. Like, it's one thing if we want to go bang our heads as 18-year-olds or 25-year-olds, but to have kids be taking the same risk, I think is something we need to take a close look at. So I enjoyed it. I thought it told a good story. What do you think, Jake?
No, I thought the same. I think you could go, like you mentioned, in a lot of different ways with it. And since you brought up the youth football side, that was something that stuck out to me because they talked about, I think it was Tyler's mom told the story of his dad coaching Tyler in 3rd and 4th grade football. And he visibly saw Tyler he was dazed. And it was just kind of the mindset and how we've needed to shift the mindset. I think it has shifted over time, but at that time, his dad told him to kind of like shake it off and go right back in. Kind of like that was the toughness he wanted to instill in his son. And there's no doubt it looked like Tyler was a tough kid, but that's not.
Yeah. That's one of the real shames of this is that this is most likely to happen to the toughest of us who won't get knocked out, we're willing to get back up from any hit and keep going. Like, those are the ones who are at risk. You mentioned, Matt Brewer. We were lucky to have Brant McCartney working with us for a while and got, know Matt's story very well. And it is one of those things, like, we just have so many stories of these guys who were the best of the best. And then for some reason in their 20s, things start going south. And sometimes it's physical pain and headaches, and there's a psychiatric and depression and anxiety. And it's just, we just published a study on this. It's important to know of 150 people who died before 30 who had donated their brain. Just under half had CT, just more than half of the football players. So one of the important things too is that when this is happening to somebody, again, we appreciate that sometimes it may be CTE, but it also is likely more due to the brain injuries they've gotten over the years, again, which are treatable. So it doesn't mean we can pull everyone out of that spiral, but the important thing is that if you or someone you care about is in that age range, younger than 50 and having these issues, like, let's get them treatment. We can help.
For sure. And it might not even be that. It might be something else, right?
Yeah, it could be. It could be not. Yeah, exactly. Some people just get unlucky too, right?
Yeah. Okay. So here we go. I got a few rapid fire questions for you because I know you got to go pretty soon. Something I was thinking about as you're doing all this, I watched pretty much every single documentary on it. I watched Concussion, the movie with Will Smith. How have you been? How has it been for you? Really kind of diving into some of this stuff with the NFL. That's a big money thing. The culture there, America's football. Here's a problem. Get out of here. Like, how does that work for you? Tell us more about that.
Yeah, this was a very unpopular concept 20 years ago. And I can tell you a million different conversations I had with people in the early days going, I think there's something really messed up around concussions, and people would just laugh at me or tell me I'm an idiot or tell me that I'm not smart enough to figure this thing out. And then when it started becoming very public in 2007, the stakes got higher, and suddenly you're on national TV, you're in front of Congress, and you're saying, I think this is what's going on. And even back then, we were doing it off of like a dozen brains. Now we have 1,600. It was a dozen brains, but we kept finding this weird thing. So it's been a journey, I guess, for me though. Like, because I remember like my English teacher in high school. One of the words he called me, and some, I think it was irreverent, or I just don't seem to. I don't. If I think I'm right, I just bulldoze ahead. So. I just, and sometimes that's good, sometimes it can be bad, but on this issue, it's been very good.
Gotcha. How about the latest? What's the latest and greatest that everybody needs to know about CTE? From a research standpoint, I guess, the data.
Yeah. So, there's a million ways to look at the data. One finding we had in July was that there's always been confusion on boxers getting punch drunk and having like Parkinson's like syndrome or like Muhammad Ali type stuff.
Yeah.
we published that actually most of the time you see somebody with CTE, so that ex-football player, boxer, with Parkinson's, they don't actually have normal Parkinson's. It's really CTE driving this. Yeah. So that's like an interesting finding, and it will hopefully inform treatments down the road.
What's the difference, if you don't mind me asking?
Lewy bodies, alpha-synuclein breakdown, different protein, basically.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think what's exciting is that we are getting much closer to diagnosing this in living people. So there's two ways to do it. One is off of clinical criteria. Do you have these symptoms and have this exposure? And it's not something that we already know about. Or and eventually we'll have biomarkers. And so we're making great progress on clinical symptoms. And then we also just started a study called Bank CTE. You can go to bankct.org to sign up, where we're asking people to donate their blood and their brain and do cognitive tests every year. And we'll marry up their blood and their brain tau levels to sort of figure out who has CT while they're alive, which we
can test tau levels inside the blood.
Yeah, you basically, there are bits of your brain floating in your blood when your brain is degenerating. And there's different types of tau, and we think we've also identified a tau ratio of like tau 217 to something else that'll sort of be the signature for CTE. So it's like we were the first academic center. There's now a lot more people working on it, but it's still a fraction of what it needs to be versus the other major diseases. So, but it is happening, and so it will be soon that you will go to your doctor and they can tell you with 80% certainty that you have CTE. And what I'm hopeful that does is not depress people, but instead get them more motivated to get involved in trials, push this forward,
do all the right things.
Yeah, take care of themselves. Help their family understand what's going on, because we see this tear apart so many families. So I'm hoping it's a positive, but it'll be a shock. Like, I'm not excited to find out if they think I have it based on the criteria.
Yeah,
sure. But it is exciting, and we're getting better at treating it too. I think the story is midlife symptoms. We're finding they're very treatable for ex-football players.
Awesome. You sound like NVIDIA in the AI space. Kind of like the pioneer. Everybody's trying to chase them. I'm kind of into AI too, so I had to mark the comparison here.
Well, it has been that way with the brain bank. Like, we are the place everyone now calls to get brains, to donate their brains. And so one of the things we've done is seed other brain banks around the world so that other people can be working on this too. So we actually have my call with our brain bank in Australia in 8 minutes. That's why I have to run.
Awesome. Yeah. Let me see if I got anything else. I had challenges. Any other challenges remain?
There's
some of them, but
challenges. Like, this is we're going up against enormous popular businesses that don't want to believe this is true, right? So we had a big breakthrough in 2022 that I wrote a paper with a bunch of colleagues that sort of consolidated what we knew through a criteria that was established by one of the scientists who first put together smoking caused lung cancer. Like, how do you understand an environmental exposure and whether or not it's causing a disease or it's just correlated with a disease? And when we looked at the data through the Bradford Hill criteria, it was extremely convincing. And so much so that I got 50 of the world's top experts to co-sign a letter to the National Institutes of Health saying, hey, your website doesn't say causation, it says association. Would you flip that? And they said, yeah, based on this analysis and our work. So that was a big deal. And so now it's like NIH says it's causation, NFL says it's causation. But the reality is NHL, World Rugby, FIFA, all these big, huge international bodies, International Olympic Committee, they do not accept causation, NCAA. And so, it's from my perspective, it's sort of obvious. They're worried about lawsuits and all these other things. But the fact that we won't even acknowledge it's a problem is a problem, right? So that's not fair to the people at risk. And then there's the other problem is, without diagnosing living people, only 1,000 families in the world have ever gotten this diagnosis. And so it's really hard to sort of build the army you need to solve this when only, so many families know. And most of them, for many of them, it ruined, like the family broke them apart. They lost their finances. So it's like, it is sort of an uphill climb in every possible direction. But luckily we have so many great people that help us out. Jake volunteered with us when he was at Harvard Law School, that we are still making great progress.
Awesome.
But yeah, I'll mention like one thing, like just around our helpline, right? We have the CLF helpline. It's free. Where I have 4 full-time people who take intake of anyone concerned about concussions or CTE, and we get them to help them find the right doctors, help them support groups, educate them on what's really happening. And we're trying to work with colleges and alumni groups to like give this away for free. Like, hey, for example, we've diagnosed like 20 players at Notre Dame with CTE, right? Out of like 22 people we've looked at or something. We would go to Notre Dame and say, hey, you guys have this. Would you share this? And no one wants to share it. The first group who has is the University of Florida. Danny Werfel and some others, Brian Levine pushed that through. And so suddenly I had a call this morning from an ex-player, like, I need help. Like, it's great. And so I'm appreciative that the Navy Football Brotherhood, hopefully we can work together to sort of get help and raise awareness of this to the guys so that they can access it.
Awesome. Yeah. That's something I'm excited about for the whole thing, and working with CLF, and felt like I had to take that to the Brotherhood, because once you kind of know and learn about CTE and even with the concussion side of things, learning all of that and seeing the need among the Brotherhood, and Tony, I'm appreciative of you joining and supporting that, and I'm excited about what we're going to be able to do for the Brotherhood in that way.
Yeah, no, I've got a couple of brothers going through similar things, and I mean, even myself, at times I'm thinking like, oh, am I looking at this too much or not? But
it messes with you.
What's that?
It messes with you. It does.
It does, for sure.
I feel, and that's why it's important to talk about it. Like, yeah.
Last question for you, Chris, because I know you got to go. What's your price of admission?
What is it?
What is your price of admission? It can be whatever that is. That thing that drives you, that thing that gets you up at, every day. I've had people say it was, perseverance, or it was sacrifice, or it was this, this pain. What is that for you?
Well, I mean, I don't know if it fully qualifies as the price of admission, but I mean, this work is my life. Like, I actually now look back, and as long as things don't go real south real fast, I was lucky to get kicked in the head and sort of find this purpose of trying to cure this disease. I love what I do. I love trying to figure out the scientific challenges, the social challenges, the helping people. So anything having to do with concussions or CT, my well is bottomless, because it's just one of those issues that I've always said, even if whether or not it affects me, it affects the people I care most about, right? One of the great things about football is that it does create these lifelong bonds. You go through real pain together, you bleed together. And, I mean, it's, again, just short of serving, and what you guys go through there, is what the rest of us have is that sort of, that testing of yourself. And so to be able to try to help the folks that I fought on the field with, is a worthy calling. And so.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Man, I really appreciate your time today. I know you got to go. I want to say thanks for getting on. This has been kind of cool for me. Excited to get the rest of Jake's story. So
I appreciate it, Tony. Thanks for having me, Jake. Thanks for all you're doing for the foundation and this connection. And then, I look forward to, happy to come back anytime.
Excellent.
All right.
Awesome.
Take care,
Have a
guys.
good night.
You too.
So that was a lot of fun talking to that guy. I know, he was probably a good mentor for you.
Absolutely.
Especially as you get into law and going through all that. So tell us the Jake Juriga story.
So since this is focused on, athletics and brain health, I'm going to kind of keep the focus of that, as I'm going through my story, and keep it on sports. So both my parents played sports at a high level, but they're super humble about it. And so you never, it was always glimpses of kind of some of their accomplishments, or you hear about things, or, I remember in middle school one time we go to University of Illinois football game, which occasionally we went to. It's not like it's, my dad's this diehard Illini fan, obviously supports them and everything like that. But, and he's honored for, I think, top 10 greatest offensive linemen of all time at University of Illinois, and like the all-century team. And it's like, you have moments like that where like, holy, this yeah, I didn't always appreciate that because they didn't make that a forefront of who they were in like in our life. But
awesome.
they love sports, and so I grew up playing all sorts of sports, especially as a young kid. I played soccer, baseball. I did gymnastics for a few years. I did.
Dude, me too. Don't tell anyone.
I definitely recommend. Yeah. Well, what's funny about this is like literally, I remember at one point one of the coaches came to my parents like, he probably doesn't like have a future in gymnastics, right? It's like yeah. Anyway,
it's a good way to expend energy as a young.
Oh, absolutely. Body control too, and like body strength. I think all of those things. It's good.
Listening to coaches, all that good stuff.
It's all good. So, but one of the things I didn't do was my dad, his hard line was like, I wasn't going to play football until middle school, like 6th or 7th grade. And I don't know if I fully appreciated that at the time. I'm sure I didn't, but I did play flag for like 1 or 2 years before playing tackle. And I'll go into like that 6th grade year for a second, because I think it kind of relates back to what we were saying about youth football and kids playing. And so I remember even at these like 6th grade tryouts for like a Pop Warner style league, that there was already kids who, were the regulars and who were the coaches already had on their radar of who they're going to pick at these tryouts. There's a couple like 2 gold teams, and the rest of the players go to the silver teams. And I was just learning as I'm going in tryouts. But the reason I kind of go into the 6th grade is that, like, while I felt behind in that immediate moment, like, you can catch up quick. If you're active and you're playing sports and you're engaged, like, I don't think you miss that much by not playing football before middle or high school. Like, I think you can make up that ground quick. And that's something with my kids, I wouldn't let them play before 6th grade, maybe even later.
That's when I started with 6th.
6th, same for you. Yeah. So, and I mean, that's the thing. So like you can then fast forward a little bit, and you can say that I made the gold team despite having like no previous experience playing it. And I made the lesser of the 2 gold teams, ones that didn't, there's 1 gold team that got all their top picks. But then we go on that year to beat the better gold team. And then you fast forward through high school, and it's like, I played 3 years went to a big high school, like 500 plus students per class, and played 3 years of varsity, senior year is all state. And so then at that point, like life story wise, it's kind of deciding where you're going to go to college is the next big decision point. And man, I'm grateful. Out of the decisions in life and beyond faith and marriage, like deciding to go to the Naval Academy is definitely one of the best decisions.
Did you have any other options?
So I did. I was like, it's hard though, is the variation in options. So I could have we had the Yale coach over for dinner, and like Yale really wanted me to come play for them. I was recruited by several big schools, and I could have walked on at Northwestern. Notre Dame even had offered me a walk-on spot. But the only true like offer in a sense,
the no cost one,
the Navy,
the one that we were all looking for.
True, like you're not going to pay for school kind of offers it was Navy, right? Because if you go to Ivy League, you're like there's no athletic scholarships.
Yeah.
Or at the time, I don't even know how that's changed with NIL stuff.
I did visit Harvard actually.
The what?
Harvard for a visit.
Did I visit?
No, I said I actually visited Harvard.
Oh, you did?
I did, but there was a cost to it, so that was a problem.
Yeah, it's not like a small cost.
No, it's huge,
dude. Like, that was something that you're looking at, and it's like it's hundreds of thousands of dollars
for sure. It's more expensive than walking on to public.
Oh, definitely.
Somewhere.
And so like it was always important to me. In the other parts of life, academics were a main focus of mine in addition to football. So I was looking for that combination of the best place, highest level of football with the top-notch academics. And so Navy fit those, but it's not something that I was like, I never heard of, honestly, the Naval Academy growing up. And it wasn't until Coach Grantham was my recruiter. So Coach Grantham came.
Really good dude.
What?
I think he was a really good guy.
Absolutely.
Good dude.
Yeah, absolutely. I love Coach Grantham. So he he was kind of my introduction to the Naval Academy and even exploring that as an option. So I only found out that one of my aunts had served in the Navy for a couple of years, like way back. I found that out after I think I started exploring the Naval Academy as an option. So it wasn't on my radar. I'm so glad that I made that decision, not just for the football and the, and the academics, but the opportunities and the opportunity to serve, everything like that. The next kind of inflection point, I think, my story that'd be relevant here is more of I'd say one of the most difficult decisions that I made. And it's not one that I've talked about with many people outside, like my wife and family. And that was a decision to hang it up. And so I'm not sure if you even know, actually, but I didn't play senior year.
Saw that. I was looking at the roster and I was trying to figure out what your senior year was.
Yeah. So I stayed on. Yeah, that was something Coach Niamat wanted me to come back, and I can go into that conversation or whatever. But I ended up accepting to just come back as a student coach and help out the team where I could. But it was tough, and that's still tough. But it's in way like.
Well, no, let's go into it.
So I'll go into it. So I show up plebe year, freshman year, and at some point during that season, end up tearing both labrums in my shoulders, and then it gets to the point in through spring ball that like your shoulders are just like slipping out every practice.
There was no easy walk right there.
And I know you probably were closer in the age group, right, to like Jared Shannon, but I was kind of in that same like, it's brutal. And then so you have the option after the season. I was looking at getting the surgery, and it's a long recovery. It's 6 months, and so like you get the surgery at the end of the season, like you're just barely making it back for the fall, or rehabbing. And so at that time, I decided to try to go the rehab route, and I was just like lived in the training room, and to rehab, like the whole training staff's credit, I showed up sophomore year, like youngster year, in the best shape of my life, at the biggest I've ever been. And so I'm a big believer in rehab in general over surgery from labrum standpoint, but that's a kind of separate conversation, because in that season, it's about 2/3 of the way through the season, all of a sudden it's happening again, and slipping out all the time. And kind of the problem, especially with being a linebacker, with your shoulders slipping out, is then you're not able to use your hands in the same way.
Yeah.
And so what are you hitting with every time instead, and making up your head? Yeah. And so I'm hitting my head and like my neck, like I can just tell it's starting to have neck problems, and just hitting my head way too much, and then with my head way too much to try to compensate. And then I get the surgery and get bilateral labral repairs, 6 weeks apart, 6-month recovery for each, and come into junior year ready to go and see the field. And so I'm up. That's where I played special teams, traveled. A lot of great memories from that time, and like wouldn't trade it for anything. But again, like 2/3 of the way through the season, my shoulder slips out, and it's like devastating, right? Because like that's one thing that makes me feel better about the decision, is like I know I put everything I had into rehabbing and being ready, as ready as I could be, shoulder health wise and physically. So
no, dude. No harm, no foul on that one.
I mean,
I know a lot of guys that can't lift their shoulder down. So
dude, yeah, I still like my range of motion is I can't go I don't know if it's not we're showing it here, but like I can't even make it close to 90 degrees. I finished the season, and still, that first game that it happened, don't think I traveled to, but then made it back and finished the season. And it's definitely not something I was going to let stand my way from that standpoint. Like you finish what you started, but when you're in between seasons, it feels more of like you have the time to think about it and think about like, what do I want my future to look like physically? And that's, I think, where some of the story of my dad is relevant. Is like growing up, there was these glimpses of like his career and how great and successful he was. but the more physical daily reminder was like I saw the effects from his career physically.
Yeah.
In the pain, like he put on a good face, never complain. Like he's not one to ever complain. The toughest dude I know. And there's a lot of freaking tough people at Navy, and that's part of our brand. But like he, so he never complained, but you could, if you're paying attention, you can see it, right? There's just like his knee, his shoulder, and most of all his back, and that's the reason he retired from the league.
So his back, which part of his back? I gotta ask that.
It's
lower?
I wish I knew it better. It's I think the L4, L5, like it's in the lower back.
That's lower, yeah.
Yeah, and I just know he like I think it's a couple blown out discs or something like that. It's something to the.
You ever get surgery on it?
He didn't.
Okay.
I don't believe. Yeah, no, I don't think he ever did.
Gotcha.
But it was one of those things. Like growing up, he had to have a back brace on for anything. Like, and I even remember as I was getting older, like he'd help coach and he'd coach my brother's baseball. But it's like he for some reason, you get drawn into the game and he goes and he's in the outfield and tries to run for a ball or something that he can't walk for the next couple of days, kind of thing. And you're like, so there's this constant reminder of the physical effects of football. Yep. But something that's worth like going into here is like you see, and this I think overlaps with the Concussed documentary. Like you see Jim McMahon in the documentary says, I knew about the knees and the joints. He's like, but I didn't know about the brain. And that's something I feel like is similar for me, is that like, obviously I saw that with my dad. That's why he retired. And it was, like I said, he did everything with us and put on a good face, but the physical effects were there and were visible. The brain effects are not always visible. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think in deciding to hang it up, for me, that was kind of in the back of my mind as well. And so I made the call to kind of, to help in other ways the senior year.
With your involvement with the Concussion Legacy Foundation, working with Chris, you met him that first time, did an internship. Obviously, your dad's probably a champion in whatever you're doing, right?
Definitely.
What kind of feedback has he given you on that?
Yeah, I mean, he always supporting what I'm going after, and I think on the CTE front, it's something that he's aware of. He's he has established a baseline for himself, and the NFL's funded some research as well, and so they've partnered with, I think, Cleveland Clinic and maybe Harvard Medical School, and so he's like helped participate in the research to try to advance what they know about CTE. But it's not something that, like, again, he never talked about like the pain or anything like that, and so he's not someone to really talk about either I think the brain side of it. So it's not a conversation we have often, but it's something I know he's tracking.
Gotcha. Well, cool. Back onto the Navy part of it, is what do you any good memories that come out of your time playing Navy football? Have a good coach story? I bring that up with a lot of folks, or a fun memory.
Yeah, it's
on the field.
There's a lot of good ones. I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to have the one kind of from the top of my mind, because there's a lot in a lot of different contexts, both on and off the field. But some of the highlights from playing and like from traveling are just like playing at Notre Dame, playing at University.
I remember doing tackling drills with you, and I was like, man, this guy can hit too.
That was something I prided myself on too. Like I wasn't, whoever it was, I was going hard, in full speed the whole time. So, I don't know what comes to mind as the best, but I think those are, as far as athletically, like game wise, some of those environments that you get the opportunity to play in, and the games you get to play in, like that, there's nothing like that. So, those were highlights.
Gotcha. How about a biggest mentor for you?
I mean, I got to say my dad still. Cool. So yeah, in a lot of ways, in not just the kind of toughness aspect, but the discipline, the humbleness. Like, and my mom was always also humble about her career, so I can expose it for her a little bit, but like this kind of shows the level, right, of humbleness that they carried. As I knew my mom played for Illinois, but again, had no idea how good she was.
In what?
Volleyball.
Volleyball. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And so until like maybe middle school again, I was like digging for something in the basement and storage, and come across this cardboard box, and all of a sudden I'm kind of like dusting off a plaque, and it's like Big Ten. She was all Big Ten. She was the captain of her team when they went like 39-3 her senior year. Set the record for solo and total blocks. I think she still holds those records. So yeah, I never lived up to my parents' athletic careers, but that is, I think the humbleness is something that I always want to try to emulate going forward. And I think that's something that's another trait that I hopefully carry forward. I get to brag about him a little bit here, but yeah.
Well, back to your story. I know we jumped around a little bit. I wanted to ask you about law. You're the fourth lawyer I've gotten on here.
Really?
Yeah.
So it's surprising the number of brothers in law. Yeah. There's several. So I know you've had Kevin, and then because I listened that episode.
Kevin
Edwards.
Oh, I haven't had him yet.
Oh, you didn't? I thought you did.
I haven't had him. No, I want to get him.
Oh, you did. So he's the one that came to mind first for me. So yeah, maybe he's one to have on. I think he's got his own firm going. So
yeah, I've talked about him before.
Okay, maybe that's what
I remember with who.
Well, the most personal connection for me in the law is to Gigi Green.
Okay, nice. Didn't know he was in that. Awesome.
Yeah, so he's actually at the same firm that I'll be going to this next summer, awesome. And he's the one who introduced me to it. So Gigi's been a huge, from the legal standpoint, number one mentor is actually Gigi. So when I was looking at law schools, really? Yeah, man, he's been incredible. So looking at law schools, he sent me all of his materials, like help walk through what he did to study, and to prepare his like personal statements and essays, and then looking for firms. He made the introduction for me to the firm, and it's been a great fit, and it's a firm I'm excited to go back to next year.
Cool.
Yeah.
Anything else about your story?
Yeah, I mean, I can fast forward from that point, right, of senior year, and just say like, it was another difficult decision was like deciding to leave the Navy, and that's like I enjoyed my time in years of service, and you serve with a lot of great people, yeah, again, huge part of why I'm so grateful that I made the decision in the first place to go to the Naval Academy. But from the opportunity standpoint, and this might be good for certain members of the Brotherhood, is I served 10 years. And so I hadn't realized at the time as a midshipman that like you serve 3 more years past your commitment, a minimum of 3, then you have 100% of the GI Bill. And so when I was looking to transition, that's when it kind of clicked for me that like I have the GI Bill now, and I could go to a graduate school. And
or you could have gotten out and then got it waived.
Yeah.
College education, no student loans.
No, there's different. Yeah, there's different. But anyway, the GI Bill is paying for the law degree 100%. So awesome. It's been an incredible opportunity to be able to go to Harvard and like have the sort of random meetings that I did with Dr. Nowinski. Like there's all sorts of incredible speakers and guests, connections that like I try to take as much advantage of as I can, and it's more difficult maybe this year. So the biggest life update, other than like just starting my 3rd year of law school, is that my wife and I had our first kid. We have a baby girl, Ella, who was born in May. So
you're in for it now.
Yep. So it'd be a little bit narrowing down my focus on where I'm going to be spending my time. it's going to be as much as I can with her outside of classes. So
as we wrap this one up, I got a couple more questions. I want to touch on the concussions one more time with your experience in the space. You know, as I look at all the, you know, CTE things, the concussions, all the documentaries, all the movie about it, right? The first, you know, finding of what it is, and, you know, kind of connecting the dots to some people that said, today's my last day. Hey, it's a serious thing, right? So as I'm watching all these things, I'm thinking about, you know, my mindset in my playing years was, I just want to murder. I want to inflict as much pain on the other guy as possible. And I don't know if I would do it differently at the time from a maturity standpoint, but man, looking back on it, I wish I would have, if I were to have this information, would I have played different? I hope I would.
Right.
I hope I would, you know, make contact a little bit different. I remember my Pop Warner years, I got introduced to the tomahawk like head slam, and it really, you know, gave me an edge in those early years. Bam, 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 you know, hold them by the, you know, the shoulder pads and whack, whack, whack. I hope I would have done that a little bit differently now.
Right.
And so, you know, that's one of the reasons why, you know, my interest on the topic is so high. You know, for you, are there any other impactful concussion stories before we kind of hit those final two questions here?
Sure. So, I mean, it absolutely resonates with what you're saying. And I think the critical part of that is the information. And so that's something that, I mean, I'm full on supportive of, like what CLF, the Concussion Legacy Foundation, is doing is promoting awareness, like putting the information out there, being part of figuring out more about CTE. So the research side, so they have the information side, the research side, and then they have the support side. And so there's their helpline, and you know, that's a resource that they can connect you to trusted like medical providers, and other resources. If you're a veteran, there's a bunch of veteran resources. So that's something that like hit home for me, because that's part of what I think the mission of CLF is, and part of what I think the mission of our Brotherhood Committee is going to be, is getting the information out there so people can like make informed decisions. It's something that I worked on with the Concussion Legacy Foundation, was to try to require in states that CTE and information about CTE is actually given to parents who are putting their kids into high risk sports like football. So it's not saying you can't play football, but it's saying that like, here's the information and this is the risk, and then you can make an informed decision. And so that's what I wish that I had more of. It sounds like that you're saying like maybe you would have done differently if you had that information. And I think it's not saying to not play. Like, I love football, and I wouldn't have went to the Naval Academy if it weren't for football. But I wish I had that information as well. So concussion story wise, I was fortunate. I was never diagnosed with a concussion. I'm almost certainly had one, and I was lucky enough that it was at the end of the season. It was we lost the game in the playoffs, and I was like super nauseous, pounding headache. Never felt like that before. Never, fortunately, felt like that again. But it was the end of the season, so I didn't have to go right back into hitting or anything like that afterwards. But how the mindset has shifted for me, and like you said, it's a serious thing, but like growing up, it was kind of something that you joked about. Was
You're invincible.
Yeah, no, right. Yeah. And it's just, and it seems like, I think part of it is that it just feels like this such a temporary thing that you just heal from. And in some ways you do, it's not the same as CTE, but like, it is more serious than I think at least it was treated. So I remember a story of my grandma telling, about my dad, and it was to the extent where and he was on a really good high school team. They won state. And so I don't know at what point in the season it was, but he took such a hard hit that the coach pulled him out. And then he kept on wanting to go back in, to the point like where Chris was saying earlier, that like he was just running like Brett Favre. He said just ran back out on the field without any heads up. Like my dad just kept on, I guess, trying to run back out onto the field. And so there's some signs that it was like clearly not okay for him to be out there, even at the time. And so it was to the point where while the game was going on, took him off the field and asked my grandma to take him home. And couldn't remember his locker combination to grab his stuff, or maybe he said like the previous year's locker combo. Either way, couldn't get into his locker. And then my grandma would tell the story, like, and I remember laughing about it, was like on the ride home from the game, he's kept on being like, did I play today? And my grandma would be like, yeah, you had a game today. And he's like, did I do well? And it's like, yeah, you did well, like whatever, you know what I mean? And then a few minutes go by and it's like, did I have a game today? And it's like, you're like, whoa, right? Kind of those, that's not often, I think, but like yeah. So I'm glad that the tone of those sorts of things, I think, is shifting. And you see the shift in this, like even while I was at Navy, I'm glad that like kickoffs changed. Because man, there's people like John McCauley, where it's just like the kickoffs were designed, they had the wall back when you had like, you would try to put the ball in front of the ball carrier, and you'd have the wall busters naturally on the kickoff team who just run full speed, and try to blow up the wall like head to head. So yeah, that doesn't need to be a part of football. People don't miss having a wall or not having a wall.
I didn't know that changed.
That changed. While I was there, it might've been after you left. Yeah.
Okay.
So there's a lot of changes I think that they're making that like are in the positive direction, and the game's still great. So.
Yeah. Harry, one of the guys on the CTE committee, right?
Mm-hmm.
He was talking about, I mean, here's a guy that played with leather helmets back in the day.
No, right.
Played lacrosse, broke his neck at some point. Like, holy smokes. But as the game has grown, and he even brought this one up, is everyone's gotten bigger, faster, stronger at the same time. So that speed is totally different. And I couldn't even imagine what the speed is, the speed change is from college to the NFL, because I can remember how it felt like from high school to college.
Yeah, that's a good point too.
All right, 2 more questions. What's your biggest struggle that you're working through today? Could be anything.
Yeah, well, it's kind of thing I already mentioned it then is the going back to school. So I'm going back to school right now, and the same day that I started classes is my wife's going back to work. And so balancing having, a 3-month-old
baby girl,
and my wife working, and I'm in school and classes is probably what's going to be the most immediate struggle, but it's a great problem to have.
For sure. Last one, what's your price of admission?
Yeah. So when I think of that in the context of Navy football, I think back to Coach Niemann and his saying that, and he said it multiple times, probably in slight variations, but essentially it's that we need to do everything right. And that just gives us a chance, right? Like if we're going to beat a team and like we did, beat Notre Dame, beat Army every year, you have to do everything right just to have a chance. And so to me, that boils down to the discipline to do the little things day in and day out. And that's not easy. It's the discipline to like set priorities and follow through on them, to like devise a plan and follow it instead of, just doing whatever feels good in the moment. And so I think I think not just of the Navy football team, but in life, like the people who I look up to the most like my dad is someone, he's a doer. He absolutely will not put off till tomorrow what he can get done today. And it's just a level of, I think, self-control and discipline that I think is not like a one-time price of admission, but like a daily price that you pay to over time be great.
For sure. Good stuff, man. And thank the wife. What's her name again?
Amy. Yep.
Amy.
Yeah. So she's entertaining the little one while we're to try to keep it quiet in here for us. So
And enjoy those younger days. They go by they go by fast for sure.
Thanks.
All right, dude.
Yeah.
Good talk.
Oh,
And
great.
yeah, really good conversation.
I'll have to see how it goes listening back to myself.
Yeah. It'll sound weird.
Yeah.
I guarantee you'll say, man, I wish I would have said this.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, I'm sure this will touch somebody, and you'll hear about it somehow.
Right. Yeah.
All right, man.
Good.
Take care.
Thanks for taking the time, Don.